So we will begin our workshop titled Unresolved Ruptures, Finding Healing When Repair is Not Possible. I'm excited to introduce Eunhyey, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, ordained pastor, and spiritual director. She has worked in both therapy and spiritual direction with couples and individuals, particularly leaders in Christian ministry, as well as cross-cultural and international NGO workers for 15 years. Eunhyey received her Master of Marriage and Family Therapy from Fuller Seminary. Formerly, she served as Director of Outreach and licensed marriage and family therapist at the now-closed Asian American Christian Counseling Service. Before that, she worked as the mobilization director for REA International and worked closely with field workers based in Northeast Asia. Eunhyey is married and has one son. She recently moved back to Minnesota after almost 20 years in Los Angeles. She enjoys all the parks and lakes the Twin Cities has to offer, even in the winter. Please join me in welcoming Eunhyey.
So the fun part about being the last workshop speaker is that, well, I don't know if fun is the right word, but there's so much that I have been absorbing. And you guys might be getting a little bit of my verbal processing as I'm going through my talk in order to be able to coordinate and try to tie some threads together. But I also don't have to worry too much about that because David and Carissa have been doing such, for me, it's been very helpful to hear your summaries and the themes that you've been picking out. The question we're looking at in this hour is a question that's come up quite a few times in the Q&A times. Is healing possible when repair is not? The types of unresolved ruptures that Sangeeta described yesterday, in all of them, we are left with ongoing pain. So it doesn't end, like the pain doesn't end because it's still unresolved. And this is true whether we're the ones needing to cut somebody off or if we are the recipients of it. And let me throw in another one, if we're a bystander watching this happen to other people. So how do we live with that? How do you walk around like walking wounded and still live your life? So before we do that, though, are we able to throw up a word cloud? I want you to be thinking about categories for yourself. Do you see yourself in any of these positions? Have you ever initiated a cutoff? Then put initiator. If you've ever been on the receiving end, put recipient. And, or both, or neither. I'm going to be hopeful. Oh, wow, but look at what we've got already. Is this what you expected? Yeah, okay, seeing some nods, a lot of like taking it in. Whoa. That word both is just getting bigger. Yeah, and then initiator is in there in several different forms. So how many of us, and you can just check in for yourself, have experienced both? And today and yesterday, the groundwork has been laid for us to think about the contexts that rupture, which today I'm going to be thinking about as trauma, the trauma of rupture and how that affects us, but the bigger context of the traumas that have happened in our communities. And I threw some things up there, but the presentations before have covered it much more thoroughly. The only thing I want to highlight under racialization, displacement, and migration is the current atmosphere of detention and deportation. That the families did not choose that. That's a rupture that's been forced upon people, and you have some of the same reactions to what happened, yet there's a whole other dynamic there because it's like somebody you loved has been kidnapped and you don't know where they are, where they're going. And same for the person who has been kidnapped, separated from your family, not knowing how to reach them or not having the power. So I won't be able to go into that, but I just wanted to name that and then put that out there. But I also wanted to add to that, as part of the trauma is, and it's because of a lot of the same factors that's on the left-hand side. So that's the presence of trauma factors and the absence of culturally tuned, systemically aware care providers. So therapists, pastors, community leaders, and those in academia, you can totally resonate with this, I'm sure, researchers, writers, teachers in theology and psychology. So there was, I went to Fuller for MFT something like 15 years ago. And even then, the stuff we have now was not available. We were not talking about Asian American identity in my MFT program. We were, Fuller, they are pioneers in being able to think about psychology and theology together. But even back then, this was like not brand new, but so limited. And shout out to any of the AACCS folks, the organization I used to. Raise your hand if you were on the board or you're a therapist or a volunteer with AACCS. Okay, good. So you talk about the previous generation or our elders. AACCS, Asian American Christian Counseling Services, was a placeholder for connection and a place to think about Asian American Christian mental health. For many years, it was the preeminent organization, operated on a shoestring, and a volunteer executive director for 30 years. And I got right in on the tail end of that. When it closed down, I was really sad. But they started it, and one of the reasons they felt good about shutting down was because it was a different landscape. How many of us here now are therapists who are able to speak to the uniqueness of our situations? Or pastors and community leaders who are thinking about mental health in the Asian American context, receiving therapy. So that's the context, right? But what I want to do in this workshop is to focus on the micro level, like the really hyper-local, all inside of you sort of level. What do you do? Because personally, I have found in my own life, but also as I work with my clients, you just can't bypass the physical. There's something that happens to us when rupture happens. And our bodies and our brains simply will not cooperate unless they feel safe. And it doesn't matter how much we know about how we should do something. For example, forgive somebody. It just is not, it's not going to your body and your brain are not going to let go of its efforts to protect you. Unless it has reason to, unless it feels safe. So these are a couple perspectives on the brain and the nervous system, popularized, within the past 5-10 years. It's been really a lot. I mean, it started before then, but so this is stuff I use with my clients, but there's so much behind each one of these little pictures here. So much. We're not going to go into that. I'll just reference. On the left hand, you see the ladder, or other people might call it the polyvagal ladder. It's just a fancy word to talk about our nervous system. On the right-hand side is a hand model of the brain. That was popularized by a guy named Dan Siegel, who's very famous, especially through education. And the polyvagal ladder was popularized by two people named Deb Dana and Stephen Porges. So you can forget all about that. What I really want you to know is that these are very simple visuals that can help us map a little bit of what's happening inside of us. On the ladder, we see at the top the safe and social. This is when things are good. You're not having a trauma response, or maybe there is no trauma in front of you. This state is where we can experience calm, joy, the things that make life worth living. It's the only state where we can actually integrate new information, where we can develop insight and make meaning. Oh, and also able to engage socially. So you're feeling safe and you're able to engage in relationship with other people. The middle level is the what's also called hyperarousal, so when the nervous system is very agitated. We're ready to protect ourselves by running or fighting. Anxiety, anger, fear, they all live in this region. Social withdrawal is very common, although it may be mixed in with a lot of blaming or fixing behavior. So at the bottom, we have shutdown or hypoarousal, and sometimes it's considered the most extreme form of a trauma response or an extreme form of our body's self-protective measures. It makes you feel like you can't move or think. Sometimes you can't even stand, like your knees give out. You just want to lie down, or it just clouds over. Social withdrawal, understandably, is also common in this state. And the hand roughly correlates to these three different levels. At the top level, you've got the thinking brain. We can evaluate things. We can make decisions. The middle level is our emotional brain, or our fight-flight center. The bottom, I kind of think of it as the survival brain. This is the thing that wants to keep us alive by shutting everything else down. Kind of like if you ever have heard of somebody, they are thrown into freezing water. The last thing, everything else gets withdrawn and it's just in the core. Or when the body goes into a coma to save the life functions and give the body some time to heal. So when either of the bottom two, the middle part or the bottom part, are dominant or most active, this top part is not online. It's flipped. Dan Siegel calls it when the lid is flipped. When you close it, that's when the whole brain is working together and you're able to feel this safe and social thing. So again, two very simple tools. Kids can understand this at very young ages. You just choose whichever words you want to do with this, okay? So I thought, to give an example of what this might look like, I looked back on how different ruptures impacted me, and I was all over the map. Two stories. When I was on the receiving end of cutoff, and this has happened not just interpersonally, but in organizations as well. This is not just an interpersonal dynamic. I'm talking about churches, missions organizations, parachurch organizations, you name it, this is happening. Or at a wider societal level. Sometimes the choices that governments make and the impacts they have on us. When someone or a group has cut me off, I'm the recipient of it. What I noticed was, the bigger the cutoff was, or the more important it was to my own personal relationships, there was a lot of shock, a lack of words. I don't think I could think. It feels like the lights are going off. Like when you think of a huge warehouse, or maybe a basketball stadium, somebody's clicking off the lights, going boom, 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 boom. So it felt like that. But I also will sometimes have this reaction where there's really deep anxiety. The back of my neck will lock up like I've been in a car accident. And I'll have a huge urge to fix and make things right. Massive, what if I do this? What if I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? And then at some point, there's also going to be anger at the unfairness of not being able to explain my side of things if I'm the one who didn't choose the cutoff. When I wanted to cut somebody off, or some group, it usually starts with a lot of anger. I wanted to yell and scream. I felt like I couldn't breathe because I felt so blocked by their actions. And even when I just thought about what they did or said. And I found myself avoiding them whenever I could, because just seeing them would trigger all those same reactions again. So this is especially when it's fresh. I felt really helpless and unheard. So let's take a look at the categories that we looked at before, the top, middle, bottom. Under the bottom level, hypoarousal, what falls into that out of my own reactions? What would you say? Shout it out. And online is okay too. Yeah, the lying down. Yeah. Shock is also that part of it. Helpless. Numbness. Oh, not on there, but yes. Yes. That's a huge one, actually. Another, if you've ever seen somebody just kind of like emotionally shut down, that's another one. Like clients will talk about that a lot. Okay, I'm gonna move on to next. Hyperarousal. It pretty much covers the rest of it. I think probably most of the time, except when it's really extreme, I live in the hyperarousal. The urge to fix, the wanting to yell, emotional overwhelm, anxiety and anger, all of that is in this middle level, okay? What helped when I felt like this, and that got me closer to the safe and social state, it maybe didn't get me there all the way, but just a little bit closer, was learning to slow down. Pay attention, and this has been mentioned already, right? To what was happening inside of me. So the self-awareness, the honoring the self, attunement. And then inviting God to join me and to care for that feeling, where and when I was. And so today, I'm going to give an overview of what I want to lead us through, and then we're going to do it, okay? So the first thing, it's kind of a practice in 3 movements. The first, so attention, attend, attune. These are not new to me, although when I first learned them, I was kind of drawing from this and here and there. But paying attention is the pausing and noticing what's happening with our nervous systems, our bodies. Attending is, there's a lot of different words for this, a lot of ways to think about it, but it's that idea of you coming alongside yourself. So one different words you can use for this is neighboring. Or I like to use this image that has helped a lot of my clients is, what if your feeling was like a little child or a helpless puppy? How would you treat it? And then the third one is attune or attuning. This is where you're basically opening yourself up to see, how does God deal with this emotion inside of you? How does God treat your tough emotions? Giving God a chance to show up. And what that last one will do is it gives you're taking a risk, yes, but you're giving God a chance to show the reality of his care for you. So the paying attention, lots of different ways to do it, and some of it we've already practiced or has been mentioned in this room. SIIFT is a Dan Siegel thing, but it really, I learned to practice it just very recently. My friend Sung Shim, who's in the back of the room, leads an online practice group where you can really, how do you go from knowledge to experiencing moving out of these hyper or hypo-aroused states. SIIFT. I know a lot of therapists in this room probably already know about this. This is not new information, but it is really handy because it's like you're sifting through your feelings, and then the word is SIIFT. It's got an acronym, right? S stands for sensation, then there's impulse, images, feeling, and thought. These are 5 different windows to look at one emotion, one experience. We are going to pause here, and I'm going to lead you through SIIFT, and then I'm going to lead you through the next 2 movements, the attend and the attune, after we do SIIFT. So what I encourage you to do is grab something to write with, and just write out the letters SIIFT. This slide will stay up there, and I'm going to prompt you. Keep in mind, you don't have to do every single letter. My guideline is usually, if nothing's coming up for you in 3 or 4 seconds with that letter, just let it go and we'll move on to the next one. Because it's just one angle. You don't have to nail, it's not a test. You don't have to nail knowing yourself internally through all 5 windows. Sometimes stuff will come up, and don't be afraid to like jot it down. But it's just different options. Just think of it that way, okay? So, I encourage you to put both feet on the ground, let your blood flow sort of circulate. Lean back into your seat if that feels more supportive and comfortable. You can keep your eyes open or closed, whatever helps you focus in on your internal state. And we're going to just take a few breaths together. Let's inhale, exhale. One more time. And exhale. Allow your breath to return to natural and just notice it for a few more seconds at your own pace. And as you feel ready, I want you to get in touch with a rupture in your own life, whatever comes to mind. And I encourage you not to choose one that will go too deep unless you feel ready for it. We're just practicing. You don't have to heal all of it right in this moment. Now, even if it's just a vague sense of it, as you connect to it, let's look at the S. What physical sensations do you feel? I found that sometimes it's helpful to give these binaries to help people understand what that might mean. Well, the first one is not a binary, but where might you feel this emotion in your body? Or how about how tight does it feel? Tight or loose? Heavy or light? Smooth or rough? Big? Small? Think about all of these physical sensations of the emotion. And as you're ready, ask yourself, with impulse, what does this feeling want to do? Again, this is a really abstract question, so whatever comes to mind, just jot it down. Are there any images, pictures that are coming up for you as you focus on this feeling? Are there any emotions connected to this feeling? Next, what about thoughts? Are there any thoughts that come along with this feeling? Or another way to think about it might be, if this emotion had a voice, what would it be saying? Now stay here. And if you want, you can open your eyes and just see what you've jotted down. And then keep your eyes open or closed, whatever is helpful to you. Imagine simply being next to this emotion. As if maybe you were on a park bench. It was sitting down first, you sit down next to it. Or you come and find like a kitten in your front yard. Something that you can approach without trying to fix it or to solve it or to judge it. You just come alongside. Can you be a neighbor to this feeling? And maybe you might want to ask, is there anything you want to share with me or anything else you want to share with me? And allow yourself to listen and receive. And now, if you're willing, imagine God joining you and that emotion. How does God interact with that part of you? And as you're doing that, if there's some sort of comforting motion that you want to do, like pressing your hand on that part of you or giving yourself a hug, go ahead and do that too. And if you want, you can jot down what you've been experiencing. Stay here if there's more that's coming to you. If you're with God, I don't want to rush you out. If you're sensing it's moving to a place of closing, before you come out, do a slight scan of that spot where the feeling was, and just notice, has there been any shift, any change? Did it move? Is it lighter, heavier? Just notice. And then, as a transition, a way to return to the space, you might do something like thanking that part of you for being willing to talk with you, or simply thanking God for being with you, or you can say, I release this to you, Lord. Anything, any phrase that might help you let it go and return to this space. And then when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And if there's any intuitive movement, like you feel like you need to go like this, or do a loud sigh, or move your head from side to side, go for it. This is the time. Okay? Shake it off. Almost literally. It's something my yin yoga teacher likes to say. Integrate it into your body, between poses. Now I'm going to take one more moment of silence to let it kind of sit. And I want you to think about, what was that like for you? Online too, what was this like for you? What did you notice? What did you like? What did you not like? And feel free to jot that down too. And if people are feeling brave enough, and it's totally fine, if not, I'm going to give us a few minutes to see if there's anybody who would like to share, whether in the room or online, what your experience was like. And as people are sharing, us in this room will hold them with care and without judgment. The sharing with someone else and having them safely receive it is another layer of presence and healing. So what we were just doing right now was the how. And before, a lot of our speakers have also talked about the what. What is rupture? What is repair? This was the how. And our speakers have also talked about the why. And I just wanted to offer, for me, my own journey with the why question. The big picture, and this is more of an experience with wanting to cut somebody off. I was preparing a sermon on the oaths from the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that it was said, but I tell you, that passage. And as I was studying that, I felt like what I was learning was, what Jesus meant by that was not never swear by something. This is not a passage that is forbidding swear words, okay? So I wanted to clarify that for my church. But anyway, total aside, but as I was studying it and what came through the reflection was, it was about not trusting in our own words, not trusting in our ability to convince other people or manipulate them or force them to do things by like telling them to do it. And I felt so far from this passage because my every impulse was all of that, the anger, the yelling. It was like, you have to change. You have to do it this way. You're hurting so many people right now. And even though I saw how far I was from what Jesus was calling me to do, I couldn't change. I couldn't change in that moment. And like as I was not changing, I was reading the passage before that passage is Jesus telling them, I am the fulfillment of the law. I didn't come to abolish it. I came to complete it. I came to fulfill it. And then at the end of that section, which is often called the antitheses, is be perfect or whole or complete, the telos, right? This is the end picture of who we can become, just as your Father in heaven is whole, just as God is whole. And I was like, that is a tall, tall order. And yet, somewhere in there, I could feel some relief because God's way was so different from what I could do, so different from what I wanted to do even, that Jesus was telling us this is the kingdom, that God can make us whole. It felt like a signpost or a direction to show me that there is a different way. There is a different picture that can come out of this than I can make happen on my own. And it really felt worth wrestling with. It gave me the motivation not to give up, even though everything inside of me was like, I can't do this. I may not even want to do this. What it did help me do was at least choose to slow down and do SIIFT. I walked through it, and it helped me understand better why I was so upset. That's where I got I feel really helpless and unheard. Like I learned that's why I was upset. I felt very blocked, like my voice was cut off. And then while I was doing that, I couldn't do that step where I invited God. I was like trying, and I couldn't go there. I couldn't picture that. But what I received instead was this sense of rest. It's okay. And it wasn't like words. It was just like this impression. And what I realized was he was giving me permission not to figure things out. And that in and of itself gave me a level of, it brought things down. It brought the temperature down for me internally. It gave me the safety to do that, to be able to let go of the situation, at least for that moment, and then rest in it for a little bit longer. But because I could still feel I needed help, I reached out to this prayer group, and they sat with me over chat, over text, and I could feel it. I could feel them being with me. And all of that together helped me be this much less scared of what was going to happen in the future. It was still unresolved. Nothing had changed. Things could blow up in the next hour. But I experienced beginning to trust that my safety and well-being was not in the hands of that other person. Or you could put other group or that leader or whoever hurt you. But it was in God's. And do I experience that safety and awareness every single moment of my life? No. But that's why it's called a practice. And it's just a way to open it up, to think about it in a different way, and to create space for your body to physically feel there is a way. Okay, deep breath. We examined the question today, is healing possible when repair is not on the table? And I do want to also throw out there that sometimes repair is not on the table because that's a good it's a good thing not to try to repair. If you know that person is going to engage in the same behaviors that hurt you, and you're not in any space to be willingly cut up again, then don't do it. Like, that's not good timing. But so that's like one possible example, and other examples of when repair is not possible have been mentioned. And my experience and my hope for all of us here is that this is one way, not the only way, and certainly not an exhaustive way, to think about what next, baby steps, right? You go hyper-local. You just start with the body. Start with your physical. And as you're paying attention to that, you're giving God a chance to come in. So you can really experience, this is not just you in the fight. And this is not just them in the fight either. It's not just you and them. You're not alone. And then, I don't have it up here, but then you reach out. The community, your therapist, spiritual director, your trusted leaders. Reach out. Help them hold you. Not to solve it, because probably they can't, but they can help hold you in a place safe enough to heal. Just a little bit. And then also, the second prong is like wrestle with the why. Why try when it is this hard? When it takes everything out of you? And as you wrestle, you will experience God giving you some kind of hope or some kind of relief. At least for me and for our speakers, that's what I was hearing, is that if we reach for the hope that God has for us, that telos, that in and of itself, the completeness that Jesus has in his mind for us, that can help us see there is more to the picture. I can't stop here. I have like one addendum. What do you think? So the last stretch of preparing for this workshop was last week, which was also Holy Week. I'm telling you, like, that week is chock full of examples of rupture and of repair, but the rupture was what was really standing out for me. And if we could go back actually to the second slide, especially the Last Supper, or Maundy Thursday, including the foot washing. This is not the picture I was looking for, but it has, this artist Sadao Watanabe has done multiple renditions of the Last Supper, and this is with Peter. Peter saying, "No, Lord, don't wash my feet," right? Peter, Judas were about to betray Jesus two very different ways. But what does John tell us? That Jesus loved them to the end. Instead of cutting them off, instead of like, I'm not going to give you the Last Supper, you guys are out, because you have, if you're going to sin against Jesus, like, it's kind of like poster children for sinning against Jesus or betraying Jesus, right? But he in that moment embodied what he was talking about when he said, "I am the fulfillment of the law." And this being so like alien, so radically different than how I am, actually brings me a lot of hope. I physically feel relief when I think about that. It's not all up to me. Yes, I'm invited to grow, but Jesus does not expect me to figure it out on my own. Maybe he's using conferences like this to help me. And for each step of it, he is right here with us. And that's what I wanted to leave you here with today. Thank you.